The world can change in a heartbeat. One moment, I was watching my 7-year-old daughter Emma skipping ahead of me across the grocery store parking lot, her blonde pigtails bouncing in the afternoon sunlight, her new pink sneakers, the ones she'd begged for on her birthday last week, flashing with each step. She was singing that pop song she loved, the one that had been driving me crazy for weeks, but now I'd give anything to hear again. The next moment, my entire existence shattered. I heard the engine first, revving too loud, too close. A blue sedan took the corner by the cart return too fast, the driver looking down at something in his lap. I opened my mouth to scream Emma's name, but no sound came out. Time slowed to an excruciating crawl. The screech of tires as the driver finally looked up, the horrifying thud that will haunt my nightmares forever. My daughter's small body, flying through the air like a rag doll, her happy song cut short. The terrible silence that followed. Emma! Her name finally tore from my throat as time snapped, back to normal speed. My legs felt cemented to the ground. I was frozen in place, 50 feet away, watching helplessly as my little girl lay motionless on the asphalt. The car had come to a stop several yards past her, the driver still inside, apparently in shock. But then there was movement, not from Emma, but from a woman who had been loading groceries into her trunk nearby. She dropped everything. I remember, oranges rolling across the pavement, and ran to my daughter, while I was still struggling to make my body respond to the screaming commands in my head. "I'm a nurse! Don't move her!" the woman shouted as I finally reached them, collapsing to my knees beside Emma's broken form. Blood pooled beneath my daughter's head, soaking into her blonde hair, turning it a sickening rust color. Her leg was bent at an angle that made my stomach lurch. Her eyes were closed, her face deathly pale. "She's breathing," the woman said calmly, her fingers pressed against Emma's neck, "but her pulse is weak. We need an ambulance now." I fumbled for my phone but couldn't seem to make my fingers work. They trembled so violently that I dropped it on the pavement. The woman, I would later learn her name was Natalie, took it from me gently and dialed 911 herself. She spoke clearly, providing our location and a concise assessment of Emma's injuries. 7-year-old female, pedestrian struck by vehicle, unconscious with head trauma, possible broken femur, suspected internal, injuries, breathing but pulse is thready. "Yes, I'm a registered nurse. We need immediate response." Then she handed the phone back to me and returned her full attention to my daughter. A small crowd had gathered around us. The driver of the car had finally emerged, a young man, maybe 20, with tears streaming down his face, repeating, "I didn't see her, I swear I didn't see her," over and over. Someone was guiding him to sit on the curb. Another person had brought a blanket from their car, but Natalie waved it away. "Don't cover her. I need to see her breathing," she commanded. Her voice was firm but calm, a stark contrast to the chaos around us. She gently felt along Emma's neck and spine, her movements precise and practiced. "Is she going to be okay?" I managed to ask, my voice sounding far away and unfamiliar to my own ears. Natalie didn't offer false reassurances. "I'm doing everything I can until the paramedics arrive," she said, her focus unwavering. "Talk to her. Even unconscious, she might hear your voice." So I did. I talked through my tears, told Emma how much I loved her, reminded her of our plans. To go to the aquarium that weekend, promised her anything and everything if she would just wake up. All while this stranger, this angel in a simple grey t-shirt and jeans, fought to keep my daughter alive. For the next 11 minutes, until the ambulance arrived, Natalie was Emma's lifeline. She stabilized her neck, monitored her breathing, and kept me focused when I started to spiral into panic. When Emma stopped breathing for 30 terrifying seconds, Natalie performed rescue breathing with the steady hands of someone who had done it many times before. "Stay with us, sweetheart," she murmured. "Your daddy's right here. You're going to be okay." I could only watch, useless and broken, as this stranger fought for my daughter's life with more competence than I had ever shown as a father. The sound of the ambulance siren was both the longest awaited and most terrifying sound I'd ever heard. The paramedics arrived in a flurry of activity, and Natalie immediately began relaying information in medical terminology I didn't understand. She stepped back only when they had taken over Emma's care, moving to stand beside me as they worked. "Will you ride with her in the ambulance?" she asked me. I nodded mutely, unable to form words. "I'll follow in my car," she said. "Which hospital are they taking her to?" I don't know," I stammered, reality still feeling distant and hazy. She turned to one of the paramedics and asked. "St. Luke's," she nodded. "Good trauma center. I'll meet you there." Before I could ask why she would do that, why this stranger was inserting herself so deeply into our crisis, Emma was being loaded into the ambulance, and I was climbing in after her, my eyes never leaving my daughter's still face beneath the oxygen mask. I don't remember much about that ambulance ride, just the beeping of machines, the paramedics' constant updates on Emma's vitals, and my own desperate, silent prayers to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. "Please don't take her. Please don't take her. Take me instead." At the hospital, Emma was rushed into the trauma center, and I was left standing in the hallway, my shirt stained with my daughter's blood, my mind unable to process what had happened. A kind nurse led me to a waiting area and pressed a clipboard with forms into my hands. Insurance information, medical history, allergies, the everyday bureaucracy of catastrophe. I stared at the forms, the words swimming before my eyes. "Here, let me help you with that." I looked up to see her, Natalie, standing there, just as she'd promised. She'd washed the blood from her hands, but there were still faint stains on her jeans where she'd knelt beside Emma. "You came," I said stupidly. "I said I would." She sat beside me and gently took the clipboard. "What's Emma's full name?" "Emma. Grace Mitchell," I answered automatically. "Date of birth?" "September 12th, 2017. Any allergies or medical conditions?" And so it went, Natalie methodically extracting information from my shocked brain, filling out the forms with neat handwriting, while I sat there hollow and terrified. When the forms were complete, she took them to the desk, spoke briefly with the intake nurse, and returned to sit beside me. "They're working on stabilizing her now," she said. "The doctor will come talk to you as soon as they have news." "Why are you doing this?" I finally asked, the question that had been bouncing around my shocked mind. She seemed surprised by the question. "Because you and your daughter need help right now." "But you don't know us." "I don't need to know you to care what happens to your little girl," she said simply. And in that moment, I think I might have started to fall in love with her, though I wouldn't recognize it until much later. We sat in silence for some time after that. Minutes or hours, I couldn't tell. The emergency room bustled around us, a universe of other people's crises unfolding, while mine sat front and center in my consciousness. At some point, Natalie disappeared and returned with 2 cups of coffee and a sandwich for me that I couldn't eat. "You should try," she encouraged gently. "Emma's going to need you strong." I forced myself to take a few bites for Emma's sake. The sandwich tasted like cardboard, but the coffee was hot and bracing. "I'm Jason," I finally said, realizing I hadn't even introduced myself properly amidst all the chaos. "Natalie Reed," she replied with a small smile. "I wish we were meeting, under different circumstances." "You're really a nurse?" I asked. She nodded. "Intensive care at Central Memorial. I was off duty today, thankfully." "Thankfully," I echoed, the word barely scratching the surface of my gratitude. Before we could say more, a doctor in scrubs appeared, looking tired but focused. "Family of Emma Mitchell." I stood up so quickly I nearly knocked over my coffee. "I'm her father." "I'm Dr. Kaplan, trauma attending. Your daughter is stable but critical. She's suffered a severe head injury, a punctured lung, and a compound fracture of the left femur. We're taking her to surgery now to repair the lung and set the leg. The neurosurgery team is also standing by to address any swelling in her brain." The words hit me like physical blows. Brain, surgery, critical. I swayed on my feet, and suddenly Natalie was there beside me, her hand on my arm, steadying me. Is she going to? I couldn't finish the question. Dr. Kaplan's expression softened, slightly. She's young and otherwise healthy, which works in her favor. The next 24-48 hours will be critical. I understand she received immediate care at the scene. He glanced at Natalie. Yes, I said. Natalie here. She saved Emma. The doctor nodded. That immediate intervention very likely made the difference. The surgery will take several hours. There's a waiting area on the surgical floor where you can stay. The nurse will show you. And then he was gone. Back through the doors where they were preparing to cut into my little girl's body to try to save her life. I can't lose her, I whispered, the fear finally cracking through my shock. She's all I have. You're not going to lose her, Natalie said firmly. Not if I have anything to say about it. She stayed with me for hours after that, long past when any stranger should have felt obligated. She guided me to the surgical waiting room, explained in layman's terms what the procedures would entail, and even called my mother to let her know what had happened when I couldn't form the words myself. Around hour 3 of the surgery, I finally thought to ask, "Don't you have somewhere else to be? Family wondering where you are?" She shook her head. "Just my cat, and he's used to my strange hours. I've already texted my friend who has a spare key to feed him." "Why would you do all this for people you don't know?" I asked again, still unable to wrap my mind around her kindness. Natalie was quiet for a moment, her eyes focused on the generic painting of flowers hanging on the waiting room wall. 8 years ago, my little brother was in a car accident, she finally said. He was alone when it happened. By the time I got to the hospital, it was too late. I've always wondered if someone had been there right away, if things might have been different. She looked back at me. I couldn't save him, but I could be here for Emma today, and for you. I had no words adequate to respond to that. So I just reached over and took her hand, squeezing it gently. She squeezed back, and we sat like that, two strangers connected by trauma and compassion, until the surgeon appeared 6 hours later to tell me that Emma had survived the surgery. "She's in recovery now," Dr. Kaplan said. "We've repaired the punctured lung and set her leg. There was some swelling in her brain, but not enough to require surgical intervention at this time. We'll be monitoring it closely." "When can I see her?" I asked, my voice raw from unshed tears. "She'll be moved to the pediatric ICU within the hour. You can see her then, but she'll be heavily sedated." I nodded, relief making my knees weak. She was alive. My little girl was alive. After the doctor left, I turned to Natalie. "Thank you," I said, knowing the words were hopelessly inadequate. "I don't know what I would have done today without you. You would have found your way," she said kindly. "Parents are stronger than they know when their children need them. Still, I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "There's nothing to repay," she said firmly. "But I should go now. Emma's stable, and you'll be with her soon." A sudden panic gripped me at the thought of this lifeline disappearing. Would it be okay if I got your number, just to let you know how she's doing?" Natalie hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Of course." She took my phone and entered her contact information. "Feel free to text me updates, and if you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." And then she was gone, leaving me to face the longest night of my life alone, sitting beside my daughter's hospital bed, listening to the rhythmic beeping of the machines keeping her alive, and wondering about the woman who had appeared out of nowhere to save us both. The next 72 hours were a blur of hospital corridors, doctors' updates, and the steady beeping of monitors. I learned more medical terminology than I ever wanted to know. Intracranial pressure, Glasgow coma scale, pulse oximetry, the language of catastrophe, measured in numbers and scales. Emma remained unconscious, but stable. "Medically induced coma," the neurologist explained. "It gives her brain time to heal without added stress." My mother arrived from Cincinnati the day after the accident, bringing with her a suitcase for me and a well-worn teddy bear that had been Emma's favorite as a toddler. She gasped when she saw Emma pale and small beneath the tangle of tubes and wires, but quickly composed herself for my sake. "She's going to be fine," Mom said with the certainty that only grandmothers can muster. "She's a fighter, just like her daddy." I wasn't so sure about that. What kind of fighter freezes when his daughter is in danger? But I nodded anyway, because arguing took energy I didn't have. Vanessa, my ex-wife, arrived later that day, her face tight with worry and something else, guilt perhaps, for not being there when it happened, though that wasn't fair. It hadn't been her weekend with Emma. It had been mine, my responsibility. "What happened exactly?" she demanded, her voice sharp with fear. I recounted the story mechanically, having already told it to police officers, doctors, and hospital social workers. When I got to the part about Natalie, Vanessa's expression changed slightly. So this woman just happened to be there, and she knew exactly what to do. "She's a nurse," I explained. "She saved Emma's life. The doctors confirmed it. Without her immediate care, Emma might not have—" My voice broke. Vanessa's face softened. She reached out and squeezed my hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable months ago when our divorce was still raw and painful. "I'm glad she was there then," she said simply. We settled into an uneasy coexistence at Emma's bedside, taking shifts, so one of us was always there. Vanessa during the day, me at night, my mother filling in when one of us needed to shower or eat or just breathe air that didn't smell of antiseptic and fear. On the second day, as I was returning from the cafeteria with a coffee that I knew would taste terrible but would keep me awake, I saw her. Natalie was standing at the nurses' station, talking quietly with one of the PICU nurses. She was dressed differently today. Navy blue scrubs, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, a stethoscope around her neck. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating from lack of sleep. But then she turned and saw me, and her face lit up with a genuine smile that made my heart skip a beat. "Jason," she said, walking toward me. "I was just asking about Emma." "You came back," I said, echoing my words from the day before. "I told you I would check in," she said, and I realized she must have texted me, but I'd been so focused on Emma that I hadn't even looked at my phone. "I'm on my lunch break from my shift. I brought something for Emma." She held up a small gift bag. Thank you. Would you like to see her?" Natalie nodded, and I led her to Emma's room. Vanessa had gone home to shower and change, so it was just my mother sitting beside the bed, reading aloud from Charlotte's Web, Emma's current favorite book. "Mum, this is Natalie Reed," I said. "She's the nurse I told you about, the one who helped Emma at the scene." My mother stood immediately, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh, my dear," she said, pulling a surprised Natalie into a fierce hug. Thank you for saving my grandbaby." Natalie returned the hug awkwardly, clearly unused to such effusive gratitude. "I'm just glad I was there," she said when my mother finally released her. She approached Emma's bed carefully, her eyes taking in all the equipment with a professional's understanding. "She's looking better today," she observed. "Her color is improved. The doctors say her brain swelling has decreased," I confirmed. "They're going to start bringing her out of sedation tomorrow if the trend continues." Natalie nodded approvingly. "That's excellent news." She placed the gift bag on the bedside table. "It's just a little something for when she wakes up. A stuffed elephant. Studies show that having a comfort object can help children process trauma during recovery." "That's very thoughtful," my mother said, giving me a curious look that I chose to ignore. Natalie stayed for about 20 minutes, reviewing Emma's chart with the kind of understanding I'd been desperately trying to achieve for 2 days, explaining in clear terms what various readings meant and what milestones we should look for in Emma's recovery. Before she left, she handed me a cup of coffee, real coffee from the shop across the street, not the cafeteria sludge I'd been subsisting on. "I thought you might need this," she said. "Hospital coffee is notoriously terrible." Our fingers brushed as I took the cup, and I felt a jolt of something, connection, gratitude, attraction, that caught me by surprise. It must have shown on my face because Natalie quickly stepped back. "I should get back to my unit," she said. "I'll check in again when I can. And Jason," she hesitated, "take care of yourself too. Emma's going to need you at full strength when she wakes up." After she left, my mother gave me a knowing look. "She seems nice," she said, in that tone mothers have perfected over millennia. "She saved Emma's life, Mom," I said, deflecting the implication. "Of course she's nice." My mother hummed, returning to her book. "If you say so. But the truth was more complicated than I was ready to admit, even to myself. In the midst of the worst crisis of my life, I was noticing things about Natalie Reed. The grace with which she moved, the kindness in her eyes, the competent strength in her hands that had literally kept my daughter's heart beating. It felt wrong, somehow. Inappropriate. My daughter was fighting for her life, and I was noticing the curve of her saviour's smile. What kind of father did that make me? I pushed the thoughts away and focused on Emma, where my attention belonged. But later that night, as I sat alone in the dim light of the hospital room, listening to the steady rhythm of Emma's breathing, I found myself sending Natalie a text. "Thank you for coming today. And for the coffee. Both brightened a dark time." Her reply came quickly. "Anytime. How is she tonight?" And so began a daily exchange. Updates about Emma's condition, encouragement from Natalie, small insights into each other's lives shared in the quiet spaces between crisis points. I learned that she had moved to the city 5 years ago from Seattle, that she specialized in trauma care, that she volunteered at a children's trauma recovery center on weekends, and that her cat was named Captain Whiskers, a name inherited from the shelter where she'd adopted him. In return, I shared bits of myself. My job as an architect at a small firm specializing in sustainable design. My love of cooking, though I rarely had time for elaborate meals. The children's book I'd been writing and illustrating for years but never seemed to finish. The bitter pain of my divorce 2 years earlier, when Vanessa left me for Richard, a doctor she'd met at a school fundraiser. On the 4th day, Emma opened her eyes. I was alone with her when it happened, Vanessa having left for work after the morning doctors. Rounds showed continued improvement. One moment I was sketching idly in my notebook, and the next I heard a small, confused sound. I looked up to see Emma's blue eyes, my eyes, open and looking at me with confusion. "Daddy?" Her voice was raspy from the intubation tube that had been removed the day before. "Emma!" I was on my feet instantly, pressing the call button for the nurse while leaning over her bed. "Hi, baby. I'm here. You're okay." "What happened?" she asked, her small forehead creasing with confusion. "Where am I?" "You're in the hospital, sweetheart. You had an accident, but you're getting better now." I stroked her hair gently, careful to avoid the bandages still covering part of her head. "How do you feel?" "My leg hurts," she said. "And my head feels funny, like it's too big." The nurse entered then, quickly followed by Dr. Kaplan. They checked Emma's vitals and pupils, asked her simple questions to assess her cognitive function, and finally gave me the news I'd been desperate to hear. "She's doing remarkably well," Dr. Kaplan said. "Her neurological responses are strong. We'll need to run some tests to be sure, but I'm optimistic about a full recovery." I stepped into the hallway to make the necessary calls. Vanessa first, then my mother. And then, without really thinking about it, Natalie. "She's awake," I said. When she answered, my voice choked with emotion. "Emma's awake and talking." "Oh, Jason, that's wonderful." Natalie's genuine joy flowed through the phone. "Is she oriented? Does she remember what happened?" "She seems to know who she is and who I am." "She doesn't remember the accident, which the doctor says is normal. They're running tests now." "That's actually good news," Natalie assured me. "Traumatic amnesia around the event itself is very common and often protective. I'm so happy for you. Jason, for both of you." "I couldn't have gotten through this without you," I said impulsively. "I mean that." There was a slight pause before she replied. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. But I'm glad I could help." After we hung up, I stood in the hallway for a moment, letting the reality sink in. Emma was awake. She was going to be okay. The nightmare of the past 4 days was beginning to recede, leaving in its wake a bone-deep gratitude and something else, something new and fragile that I wasn't ready to name. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of recovery. Milestones. Emma's breathing tube was removed completely. She graduated from liquids to solid foods. The bandages came off her head, revealing a small shaved patch where they'd inserted an ICP monitor, much to Emma's dismay. "I look like an alien," she complained, examining her reflection in the small mirror Vanessa had brought her. "I think it makes you look tough," I countered. "Like a warrior princess." She considered this for a moment. "Can I get a blue streak when my hair grows back? Like Aunt Kelly has?" I laughed, the sound rusty but real, my first genuine laugh since the accident. "We'll negotiate that with your mum when you're fully recovered." Emma was moved from the PICU to the regular pediatric ward. Physical therapists began working with her on gentle exercises for her injured leg, which was now encased in a bright pink cast covered in signatures from the hospital staff. She had follow-up visits with the neurologist, who pronounced her recovery remarkable and ahead of schedule. Through it all, Natalie remained a steady presence. She didn't visit every day. She had her own busy schedule after all. But she texted regularly and stopped by at least every other day, always bringing something small. A book of puzzles to keep Emma's mind active, a softer pillowcase to replace the stiff hospital linens, a chocolate milkshake smuggled in from the diner across the street that Emma declared was the best thing ever. Vanessa met her properly during one of these visits. I watched carefully as my ex-wife sized up the woman who had saved our daughter, looking for signs of the jealousy that had characterized much of our marriage. But she seemed genuinely grateful, if slightly reserved. "Emma talks about you constantly," Vanessa told Natalie. "You're quite the hero in her eyes." "I'm no hero," Natalie demurred. "Just happened to be in the right place." "Well, we're all grateful for that coincidence," Vanessa said. Then, with a glance at me that I couldn't quite interpret, she added, "Very grateful." As Emma's discharge date approached, I found myself growing increasingly anxious, not about her care. I had prepared my apartment meticulously, following every instruction from her doctors, but about the inevitable shift in my relationship with Natalie. Without the hospital as neutral ground, without Emma's recovery as our common purpose, would she simply fade from our lives? The thought bothered me more than it should have, more than was reasonable for someone I'd known less than 3 weeks. But the intensity of our shared experience had created a bond that defied normal timelines. In crisis, people show their true selves. And what I'd seen of Natalie's true self was extraordinary. The day before Emma was to be discharged, Natalie visited with a special gift, a children's book about a little girl recovering from an injury, complete with colourful illustrations and a hopeful ending. "I thought it might help Emma process everything that's happened," she explained as she handed it to me in the hallway outside Emma's room. "Children often struggle to articulate trauma. Stories can give them the language they need." "That's incredibly thoughtful," I said. "Everything you've done has been... I still don't know how to thank you properly. Seeing Emma recover is all the thanks I need," she said, and I knew she meant it. "Still, I'd like to try. Maybe I could take you to dinner sometime, once Emma's settled at home." The invitation hung between us, and I immediately regretted it. Too soon. Too presumptuous. Too complicated given the circumstances of our meeting. "Jason, she began, but was interrupted by a nurse calling her name. Apparently, someone on another floor had recognized her and asked for a consult. "I need to take this," she said. "We can talk later." I nodded, feeling like I'd narrowly avoided embarrassing myself further. "Of course, go save more lives." She smiled, that warm, genuine smile that I'd come to look forward to, and hurried after the nurse, leaving me with the children's book and a lingering sense of uncertainty. 3 weeks later, on a bright spring morning, Emma was finally discharged From the hospital. She left in a wheelchair, hospital policy, though she'd been practicing with crutches for days, with strict follow-up. The Cooper Hill Country Club was decorated in cream and burgundy, Vanessa's chosen wedding colours. Emma had gone ahead with her grandmother, my former mother-in-law, who still treated me with unexpected kindness despite the divorce. I waited nervously in the parking lot for Natalie, checking my watch every 30 seconds and wondering if she would actually show. When her car pulled up, my mouth went dry. She stepped out, wearing a simple navy blue dress that hugged her athletic frame perfectly. Her dark hair was swept up, revealing a graceful neck adorned with a single pearl pendant. She looked elegant, sophisticated, and completely out of my league, exactly as I had hoped. "You clean up nice," she said with a hint of surprise as she approached. I had made an effort, splurging on a new suit and actually visiting a barber for the first time in months. "You look incredible," I replied honestly. "Thank you for doing this." She nodded, her expression serious. "Ground rules. I won't lie about how we met. The story of Emma's accident is real, and I won't dishonor that by making up some fake meet cute. I'll be charming, I'll dance with you once, and I'll leave after an hour. Deal?" "Perfect." I offered my arm, and she took it. As we walked toward the reception hall where the post-ceremony celebration was already underway, I added, "Just so you know, my ex-wife saw you at the hospital briefly, and there's a chance the groom might recognize you from when you both worked at Mercy General." She stopped walking. Richard Bennett is who your wife left you for." The color had drained from her face. "Yes," I said slowly. "Do you remember him?" She seemed to compose herself quickly. "Vaguely. It was years ago." She squared her shoulders. "Let's get this over with." We entered the reception hall, and just as I had anticipated, heads turned. Vanessa spotted us first. She was radiant in her wedding dress, laughing at something Richard had said when her eyes locked with mine. Her smile froze as she registered who was on my arm. What I hadn't anticipated was Richard's reaction. He turned to see what had caught Vanessa's attention, and the champagne glass he was holding slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor. The crash drew even more attention our way. "Is that?" I heard someone nearby whisper. Natalie's grip on my arm tightened painfully. Her face remained composed, but I could feel her trembling slightly. "Maybe this was a mistake," I whispered. "No," she said firmly. I committed to an hour. She plastered on a smile that didn't reach her eyes and led me further into the room. We made our way to the bar, where I ordered us both drinks. Emma spotted us and came running over, her cast now decorated with colourful signatures. "Natalie!" she exclaimed with genuine delight. "You came to the wedding too." Natalie's face softened as she knelt down to Emma's level, careful of her dress. "I did. Your dad invited me. How are you feeling, brave girl?" As they chatted, I noticed Richard making his way toward us, Vanessa trailing behind him with a confused expression. The look on Richard's face wasn't anger or annoyance as I had expected. It was pure, undiluted fear. "Jason," Vanessa greeted me stiffly before turning to Natalie. "I remember you from the hospital. Thank you again for what you did for Emma." Her eyes darted between Natalie and me. "I didn't realize you two had become close." Before I could respond, Richard stepped forward. "Natalie Reed," he said, his voice strained. "It's been, 7 years?" 8, Natalie corrected, her smile now glacial. "Congratulations on your wedding, Richard." An uncomfortable silence fell over our small group. Emma, sensing the tension, wandered off to find her friends from school. "How exactly do you two know each other?" Vanessa asked, looking between her new husband and Natalie. Richard laughed nervously. "We worked together briefly at Mercy General, like a lifetime ago." He turned to me with barely concealed hostility. "Quite the coincidence that you'd bring her here today, Jason." "Not really," I replied easily. "Natalie saved Emma's life. We've been seeing each other since then." The lie slipped out despite Natalie's ground rules, and I felt her stiffen beside me. "How wonderful," Vanessa said, clearly not finding it wonderful at all. "If you'll excuse us, we need to greet other guests." As they walked away, I could see them arguing in hushed tones. Richard kept looking back at us, with an expression I couldn't decipher. "There's something you should know," Natalie said quietly, leading me to a quiet corner of the room. "Something I should have told you when you mentioned his name." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" "Richard and I didn't just work together." She took a deep breath. "We were engaged." I stared at her in shock. "You were what?" "It ended badly," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was unfaithful. Multiple times, with multiple women. The last one was a nurse named Vanessa Harris." She looked at me pointedly. "Your ex-wife." The room seemed to tilt around me. "Vanessa broke up our engagement," Natalie continued. "But she wasn't the first. When I confronted him about the pattern, he threatened to ruin my career with false claims about medication errors. I transferred to another hospital rather than fight it." "Did you know?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "When I called you about the wedding, did you know it was them?" "No," she said firmly. "I knew your ex-wife's name was Vanessa, but it's a common name, and you only mentioned Richard today. I should have asked for more details before agreeing to this." Across the room, the whispers were growing. I could see Richard's mother, a woman I'd only met twice, staring at Natalie with undisguised shock. Several of the wedding guests, Richard's colleagues, I assumed, were huddled together, throwing glances our way. "He told everyone I had a breakdown," Natalie said, following my gaze. "That I was unstable, obsessed with him. Most of these people probably think I'm the crazy ex who showed up to ruin his wedding." "I had no idea," I said, feeling sick. "I've made you part of some bizarre revenge triangle without even knowing it. We should leave." Natalie's expression hardened. "No. For 8 years I've lived with his lies about me. I transferred hospitals, lost friends, doubted myself. All because I was too afraid to stand up to him." She squared her shoulders. "I'm not running away this time." Just then, my former mother-in-law approached us, her expression grave. "Jason, what on earth are you doing, and with her, of all people?" "What do you mean?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Don't play innocent. Everyone in Richard's circle knows about his unstable ex-fiancée. Bringing her here is beyond inappropriate." Natalie stepped forward, extending her hand with dignity that left me in awe. "Mrs. Harris, I'm Natalie Reed. 3 weeks ago, I performed emergency first aid that saved your granddaughter's life after she was hit by a car. That's how Jason and I met." Her voice was calm, but carried across the now quieting room. "And while Richard has spent years telling people I was unstable, the truth is that he was repeatedly unfaithful and threatened my career when I confronted him." Mrs. Harris blinked in confusion, looking between us. "You saved Emma." "Ask her yourself," Natalie said gently. "She knows exactly who I am." The murmurs around us grew louder. Vanessa was making her way back toward us, her wedding dress swishing angrily around her legs. Richard nowhere to be seen. "What is happening?" she demanded. "Richard is practically having a panic attack in the bathroom, and everyone is whispering." "What did you say to him?" "Nothing he didn't already know," Natalie replied. I should have felt vindicated. This drama was far beyond the petty satisfaction I had hoped for when I conceived this plan. But instead, I felt hollow. Emma appeared at my side, her eyes wide with confusion at the tension surrounding us. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about me or Vanessa, or even Richard and his lies. It was about Emma, standing there witnessing adults trapped in cycles of hurt and revenge. And it was about Natalie, who had saved my daughter without hesitation and was now being forced to relive her own trauma for my selfish plan. "Emma, sweetheart, why don't you go find Grandma?" I suggested gently. Once she was out of earshot, I turned to Vanessa. "I need to speak with you privately. Now." Reluctantly, she followed me onto the terrace outside. The afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. "Did you know?" I asked without preamble. "About Richard and Natalie. About how he threatened her career when she confronted him about his cheating." Vanessa's face crumpled slightly before she regained her composure. "I knew they were engaged once. He told me she became obsessive, that she couldn't accept the breakup. And you believed him, even after he had an affair with you while married." "To me?" She flinched. "People change, Jason." "Do they?" I laughed bitterly. 2 months ago, I found texts on Emma's iPad, messages that were synced from your phone accidentally. "Richard hasn't changed, Vanessa." Her face paled. "What are you talking about?" "Someone named Claire. From his office." I watched the recognition dawn in her eyes. I didn't say anything because, honestly, it wasn't my problem anymore. But standing, here now, watching history repeat itself. I shook my head. "I didn't bring Natalie here to hurt you. I brought her because I was hurt and petty and wanted to prove I had moved on too. But this is so much bigger than our failed marriage." Tears welled in Vanessa's eyes. "It was just texting. He promised it wouldn't go further." "That's how it started with us too, wasn't it?" I said gently. We stood in silence for a long moment, the sounds of the reception continuing without us. "I should go find Richard," she finally said. "You should." "But Vanessa..." I caught her arm gently. "Whatever you decide to do next, remember that Emma is watching. She learns how to be treated by watching how you allow yourself to be treated." She nodded slowly and walked back into the reception hall, her white dress glowing in the fading light. When I returned inside, Natalie was sitting at a table alone, her composure intact despite the stares and whispers around her. I sat down beside her. "I'm so sorry," I said. "This was supposed to be an hour of petty revenge, not whatever this has become." She smiled sadly. "Life rarely follows our scripts, does it? First at the accident scene, and now here." "Can I take you home?" I asked. "Please." As we stood to leave, Richard appeared, blocking our path. His face was flushed, his tie loosened. "Haven't you done enough damage?" he hissed at Natalie. "First you show up here, then you fill my wife's head with your twisted version of..." "That's enough," I interrupted, stepping between them. "You don't get to rewrite history anymore, Richard. Not about Natalie, not about your relationship with Vanessa, and not about Claire from your office." The colour drained from his face at the mention of Claire. "We're leaving now," I continued, calmly. "What happens next is between you and your wife. But Emma is my daughter, and she'll be spending more time at my house until you two sort this out." I guided Natalie past him and through the reception hall. Emma ran up to us before we reached the door. "Are you leaving already?" she asked, disappointed. Natalie knelt down to her level again. "Yes, sweetheart. Grown-up parties can be a bit complicated sometimes." Emma nodded seriously. "Like when people are keeping secrets. Mum and Richard were arguing about secrets." Natalie and I exchanged glances. "Something like that," I said. "I'll pick you up from Grandma's tomorrow, okay?" Emma hugged us both before skipping back to her friends, remarkably resilient in the way only children can be. Outside in the parking lot, the evening air felt cleaner, lighter. Natalie and I stood beside her car in awkward silence. "Well," she finally said, "that was certainly more than the hour I signed up for." Despite everything, I laughed. "I think I owe you more than a donation to the trauma center now." "How about dinner instead?" she suggested, surprising me. "A real one, where no one is pretending and there are no ulterior motives." I studied her face. This woman who had saved my daughter, and then, in her own way, saved me from continuing a cycle of bitterness and revenge. "I'd like that," I said. "Very much." As I watched her drive away, I realized that sometimes the debts we can never repay lead us exactly where we need to go. And sometimes the greatest thanks we can offer is to become better than we were before, not for revenge or appearances, but for the chance at something genuine and new. The path forward wouldn't be simple. There would be difficult conversations with Vanessa about custody arrangements, uncomfortable truths for Emma to process in age-appropriate ways, and the careful navigation of a potential relationship born from unusual circumstances. But for the first time in years, I felt ready to face whatever came next, with honesty rather than bitterness. That night, I called Emma to say goodnight. "Did you have fun with Natalie at the wedding?" she asked sleepily. "I did," I answered. "Truthfully, she's a special person." "I know," Emma yawned. "She saved my life, and now she's making you smile again. I can hear it in your voice. Out of the mouths of babes, as they say." "Get some sleep, sweetheart," I whispered. "I love you." "Love you too, Daddy." I hung up and sat alone in my quiet apartment, thinking about unexpected second chances and the strange, winding paths that lead us to them.